We'll call to order the February 14th, 2018 meeting of the Port Commission. And to start off, Commissioner Sandine, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, presentations by public, items that are not on the agenda. I don't have any slips to speak. That's item number one. So we'll move into...
Mr. Chair, do you want to report?
I'm sorry, yes, sir. Mr. Port Attorney, yes, report out on our closed session item.
The Port Commission met in closed session to confer with real property negotiator concerning the property described in the agenda. No action was taken. Port Commission also met to confer with legal counsel concerning existing litigation, CEPA versus RJJ Resource Management, the Port, and the City of West Sacramento. No action was taken.
All right, thank you very much. If there are no questions, I'll take us to item one. So I don't have any slips to speak, so I'll take them to item 2 and 3, which is the consent agenda. Are there any questions?
I need just a moment to go off my desk. Sorry.
Valentine's Day at the Port Commission meeting. That's what, you know.
Madam,
That's awesome.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to remove item 2 from the consent agenda.
I'm sorry, I don't even know what you just said. Can you repeat that?
No, sorry, I missed that too.
That's awesome. Yes, we
You were
still...
blocking my
we
view,
still-
Mr. Chair. No,
Well, let me step back, go ahead and do it again if you want to make that motion again. Remove item number 2. So item number 2 is a consideration of resolution P 18-2 authorizing the sale of remnant property, real property located adjacent to 3530 Carlin Drive. Ms. Richardson?
I'll go ahead and give a brief presentation on this. This land is along the barge canal, or I'm sorry, the Deepwater Ship Channel. It is proposed to be sold to the adjacent owner to the south. We are in the process of analyzing the additional amount of land that could be needed for the Enterprise Bridge. So we are actually proposing that we do a little more work on this one, and we'll bring it back on April 4th, if that's okay.
All right, very good. Any comments or questions or thoughts on staff's?
Yeah, I think I'm going to ask staff. I think we on this one, we want to provide some parameters
Yes.
of how we're
Appreciate
going
that.
to.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think the 2 issues, if I might, are the bridge, the landing for the Enterprise Bridge, which we've not commenced engineering or design, so we want to make sure that we have an appropriate margin of error as we reserve land, so we're not rebuying land later that we're selling today for a bridge that we already know we're going to construct. And the second, excuse me, is the assuring that we have sufficient land for the ultimate trail system that will be on top of the Deepwater Ship Channel over time as well. So I think those are the 2 issues that we want to be certain of. And so I think maybe the city attorney can help me out after I take a stab at it. Do you already have a draft, Mr.?
I do.
Perfect.
If you look at Resolution 1802, first we would note, and Aaron, I think you mentioned that it's actually approximately 2 acres that we're talking about, not 2.4.
That's correct. There was an errata sheet, and I should have mentioned that, I'm sorry, delivered to the Port Commission that we actually netted out 0.41 acres from the existing area that's needed for the Enterprise Bridge, so that's the change we were requesting. So now we're looking for the direction on the additional amount for both the bridge and the trail.
Right. And then if you look at the resolution in section 4A, we would add right before the "and," provided the sale does not negatively impact potential future city trails adjacent to the ship channel, something like that. And then we would add a subsection C in number 4, that the purchase agreement would include a right to repurchase a portion of the property if additional right-of-way is required for construction of the Enterprise Bridge. And the specifics of how much would be left to some discretion to identify by staff once we've had a chance to give that some thought.
All right, I'd like to move the item with that language. And just to be clear, for the landing of the bridge would include whatever road comes from the bridge out.
Yes, yes. For construction of the Enterprise Bridge.
Highly
landing
unlikely that the
and-
bridge would land and to have to immediately take a right turn,
Right.
but we don't know at this stage what autonomous vehicles might be capable of once the Enterprise Bridge is under construction.
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
So I'd move it with that language.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Yeah. Yeah, so we have a motion by Commissioner Cabaldon, second by Commissioner Sandin. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, so that takes care of item 2 on consent, and then we have item 3, so we'll just need a motion to move that before we get into the
I'll
workshop.
move the
So-
minutes or the consent agenda.
All right, so we
I'll
have
second.
a motion by Commissioner Sandin, second by Commissioner Ledesma. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So that moves us to item 4, is a workshop on amendment to the Stone Lock Development Agreement. Mr. Toft.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. We have a map for this item, which is going to guide the conversation. This item pertains to the Stone Lock 1 development site, which we will show you. We've depicted it as part of the larger Barge Canal parcel. So staff's last check-in with the commission on the Stone Lock 1 development project was in August of last year, when the exclusive negotiating agreement with Ranch Capital expired, and modifications to the Stone Lock DA were put on hold. And at that time, pardon me, I'm fighting a cold. At that time, the commission directed staff to resolve the flood protection setback issue from the Barge Canal, coordinate completion of the Pioneer Bluff Stone Lock reuse master plan with city staff, and prepare a refined DA amendment for your consideration prior to resolicitation for development proposals. So I wanted to tell you that first and foremost, the flood setback issue has been resolved with the Barge Canal Trail project, which is the subject of the next item on the agenda. And the city is nearing completion of the master plan, and that's scheduled for council consideration in April. So we're prepared to draft a DA amendment to entitle the property for development. And so with that, I know we're pressed for time tonight. The staff report outlines in the analysis section all the recommended provisions in the agreement. I'm just going to touch on the major ones. And I'll start with the major structure of the agreement. We're recommending a revenue share arrangement. This is a structure that we kind of were arrived at last time we initiated this amendment discussion, whereby the city would receive, in this case, we're recommending a placeholder amount of 80% of land sale proceeds that would go to the city for construction of public improvements in the master plan area. And first and foremost, the first call on that money, as you recall, when the port acquired the Stone Lock property, there was a $2.1 million loan from the city to the port. That loan agreement requires that it be repaid if we sell any portion of the Stone Lock property. So the first $2.1 million would go to repayment of the loan. We're recommending language that the city take those proceeds and build 2 early implementation projects, the Barge Canal Trail and Arlington Oaks Park. And those improvements and others will require land dedication. So I'm just going to talk through, using the map here, the land dedications that would be part of a development agreement. So starting on the east side of the property and moving counterclockwise, the existing Barge Canal public access area is still owned and fee by the port. That parking area would be improved, modified to accommodate sufficient parking for users of the trail and the boat ramp. Moving along to the north, the Barge Canal Trail project is shown in white, but the land dedication would be we're recommending that the land dedication would be all the property from the trail to the water line. It's currently all owned in fee by the port. And we're showing that hashed blue and white area there. That would be part of the development site, but that's a sensitive interface between the public and private properties there. So we would not prescribe any type of a setback in the development agreement. We would defer to the city's approval of the subdivision map as the proper vehicle to design the proper setback with the developer along the trail there. Moving west to Arlington Oaks Park, the park's currently sited a little bit further to the east. We're recommending that it is modified, shifted to the west to remove any dead space between the park and the inline booster pump station property, which is shown in purple. And that property, interestingly enough, is still owned in fee by the port. So that would be dedicated to the city as well. Moving down to the south, the Arlington Road Corridor is also owned by the port. It's a remnant from the Lowe's property that used to be owned by the port. That trail, that road lines up nicely with a future phase of the Sycamore Trail. So we're recommending that be included in the land dedication as well. And finally, moving back towards the east, the dotted black line there, that's depicting the general location of an extension of Locks Drive. We call it Locks Drive West at this point. The master plan will define the profile of that road. We'll leave it open as to how it gets designed, and particularly how the turning movements work to connect to the Locks Drive intersection at Jefferson. But that right-of-way would be a land dedication as well. So I'm gonna stop there. I won't get into the lesser provisions, which are outlined in the staff report, but I'm happy to answer your questions on that. We're looking for your direction tonight so that we can draft a DA amendment, bring it back to you in April for approval, right around the time when the city is adopting the Pioneer Bluff Stonelaw reuse master plan. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stock. Are there any questions? Staff's looking for some direction. Put your glasses back on if you want.
Come on, use these now.
Commissioner Weldon, did you have any comments?
Want to
Thoughts?
lead us off? This is the one you had the most issues with.
I think all the items that have been outlined make sense to me moving forward, and I think that obviously when we get this together, it actually will help us bring top value, and I think that's our job on the Port Commission in terms of the value of the site. So I don't think I have anything new to add. I think that the staff report is complete, and I'm supportive of this moving forward.
Okay.
I just don't have any additional things to add.
Well, I'll chime in. I mean, I think it makes sense now that we sort of laid out what makes the longer-term vision of the public use components a little more visible, so that in the future, the parameters set around it lay out what the vision was for this property as it relates to connectivity and public uses. And so I think that makes it a little bit easier for everybody's going into it kind of eyes wide open about the expectations with the property. So it's helpful.
Thanks, Rick, for the overview of this. I think one of the challenges of the area has always been kind of what Chair Villegas has brought up is our being able to articulate as we look for any proposal on this or how we market this. And it is about getting the value, but it's also setting us up for future development in and around the other port properties that we have. And we want, if the port is going forward as sort of the developer principal, we've kind of the principal developer primary around this and bringing in folks to to enhance it. I want to make sure that, I wanted to make sure that, as Chair Villegas brought up, is its eyes wide open about some of the expectations we've had around it. So this seems to make sense to me. Having the trail area and the kind of the levy agreement in place was critical. It's always been sort of the sore subject. So, but also just making sure we articulate the connection points between the property to the east, right? To the property to the east and to Arlington Oaks and to how we get through the Arlington Oaks Park. Articulating that was important. So again, I think I'm in agreement with the direction of this. I think it's kind of what we need to make sure we have articulated to go forward.
So I do have a couple of questions. So the original development agreement didn't grant vesting rights to the port. But we're proposing that in this DA?
Yes, yeah. Our recommendation is that basically this DA between the city and the port fully entitle the site, so a developer can run with that straight to a subdivision map.
Without a project for the city to see, or?
Well, through the solicitation process, we would, much like we did before, we would come to you and make a recommendation as to the project, and you'd be able to see the site plan at least and the pro forma.
The Port Commission, but the city government would not have, in the prior DA, the city government, in the sense of it, at the ultimate point of, since it wasn't a vesting DA, the city still had a role to, still had essentially the residual authority to say, no, that's not what we had in mind.
Right.
And so I'm concerned that we not expect that the city is going to agree to waive off all of its development reviews for something that doesn't include an actual project?
Right, so what we would, we have a stop at the planning commission, so we have a typical, DA approval process and then a two-step process with the council. So at that first reading, if you will, of the ordinance with the council, that would be where we would receive that input and make any changes that the council so desired.
But that's on the DA, that's not, but then the project, once the DA is in place, is when you would then go out with an RFP?
That's the idea.
So at no point would the planning commission or the council see even an outline of a project. At the point when we're asking them to cast give their essentially final approval to a project, and just knowing the last round when there was a fair amount of deep interest both at the commission but also at the council around what this project was going to be. I'm just concerned that the process that we're proposing here might be unlikely to prevail at the city council.
Well, there's also a subdivision map that would have to be done for the project that would also go through planning commission and council review. Once the RFP is awarded, there would be discretionary review by both planning commission and council.
And in a similar vein, so the 80% set aside is a land value. It is driven by land value, and the repayment of the $2.1 million is a fixed cost. In terms of what gets built, though, the needs in terms of some of the public improvements and infrastructure improvements could change, right? But we don't, neither we nor the council, neither we nor the city will know what those are. So we're essentially agreeing, both sides, both the public agencies would be agreeing to a fixed amount of money, more or less, or at least an amount of money that's not in any way related to density, for example, or to the findings of the trail plan or anything. Would be agreeing to that fixed amount of money in advance with no provisions in the DA for adjustments. Am I misreading that?
No, I mean, the thought was that there's a relationship between density and value, but that by entitling the site, maximizing its value, obtaining top dollar for it, excuse me, and then having the city share in those proceeds, that the exactions that typically come from a developer would be maximized through this agreement with the port.
Okay, and then Locks Drive, is our circulation plan for Southport anticipate Locks being all the way across Collector from Village Parkway to industrial, or?
Yes, so the reuse master plan, there is an element of that which will specifically look at Locks Drive West, and it does, the longstanding circulation plan does call for a collector through this site connecting to the Westbridge Plaza Shopping Center Road, and that is an awkward connection point that would get designed as part of the master plan as well. So, so we'll have this push-pull between circulation and a neighborhood-friendly street. But I think the early read that I've seen from the master plan is a 40-foot wide right-of-way, I believe, designed as a collector, 2 lanes that connects to Westbridge Plaza Road.
I mean, it's a curious collector because it does, I mean, if it as at the rank of collector, in our street hierarchy, seems like that makes more sense if it were connecting to industrial, but just connecting to a mall, whether a collector is the right, I've never been a planning commissioner, don't play one on TV, but whether a collector street is the right designation, if that's what it is. If it was an alternative east-west route for Southport, that's a different matter. But as simply a way to get into Westbridge Plaza, it seems like it might be overkill. It's worth looking at. Obviously, it's not necessary in this document to be resolved, but I just wanted to raise it. Okay. I mean, I'm prepared to vote for it here. I'm making no commitments, and in fact, I'm trying to signal the opposite for when it arrives at council, because I think these issues around what's the city's role in determining the actual land use and project that's going to be occurring at a very important site we're asking too much of city government to waive that off.
So I think the way I just want to respond to that is we tried to streamline the DA process, but hearing the feedback on that point, we can take a second look at if the city has enough interest in the project that would warrant looking at a DA, we can revisit that idea. That was the former framework, but because of all the progress that's been made, both with the master plan and with the flood setback, we were attempting to streamline the process that would potentially give more value to the site through a city port DA. But we'll, like I said, take another look at that.
So as part of that, maybe since you are looking for some feedback on that point, maybe what would be helpful, because when I hear streamline, I think of moving things a little bit quicker. And so what would be helpful maybe are the series of steps in terms of the approvals as it relates to not only the Planning Commission, the City Council, but also the Port Commission in terms of a review and approval, because while we're seemingly setting it up for development, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen 15 years from now. And so I think it's just helpful to sort of make it clear what those steps might look like, because as Commissioner Cavalden alluded to, it's highly likely that what we think we need or want today may change tomorrow, let alone 10, 15 years from now. So I just think laying that out as part of what we get maybe next time as it relates to an expedited process or a streamlined process would be helpful.
I would just add, so in addition to the DA approval, you'll obviously have an opportunity to approve a purchase and sale agreement.
Of course.
And that's another opportunity to throw it out if you hate it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think to the novice eye, that might not seem so obvious, and so I think it's just important to lay that out. I think those steps are important for all of us to be able, because chances are pretty good it's not going to be us if it takes a little bit longer. I don't know, Cabalden over here.
Thanks.
No, the statistics are not on your side on this one.
No, they're not. I would have said Christoph would still be here, but, all right, so is that enough direction for?
Can I ask one other question, actually? So when this comes back, the 80% figure, the placeholder figure, it would be important, since we're now assuming the role of, not master developer is probably strong, but intermediate developer, and you have this in here, so in part to discourage us from adding on a bunch of additional things that we might want to see on the side. I see what I see you in this space, but it does need to be enough to, in the last project, the aquatic center, we need to see that 80% in your forecast is going to, why that figure is going to produce the necessary level of infrastructure and amenities that are necessary to activate that site as a city, as a crucial part of the city's recreation and amenity system.
So just to give you a little sense of numbers, we do have a preliminary cost estimate for the Barge Canal project at $1 million. The 2.1 is certainly going to be sufficient to pay for that, immediately build that, and create that amenity quickly. Arlington Oaks Park is a little more of a in-design project, but based on the pricing that we received the last go-around, we were in the $7 million range, so 80% of that will pay for those two projects and more.
Yeah, otherwise, go backwards. Right.
Yeah, and we're assuming, I guess the deal here is that the money we owe the city is not for this project. It's not to be used on this project currently. We're asking the city essentially to divert $2.1 million that would be available for it, for whatever purpose it chose, to this project.
That's true.
And in return, we're offering all of these dedications and other enhancements in order to make that a viable deal for the city. But just to call that out, because that struck me at the beginning, is the import's not really in a position to tell the city where to spend its money, but the value of a lot of these other pieces could do offset that. So.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Very good. Seeing no other comments, that takes care of item 4. So item 5 is consideration of resolution P 18-1, modifying the irrevocable offer of dedication for property related to the Barge Canal Trail project. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. So just kind of teeing off of the Stonelock DA workshop, just looking at this item, the premise of this being an amendment to the existing IOD within the area. So you can see from the exhibit, we would just be looking to amend the IOD to facilitate the Barge Canal Trail project, and in commencing this amendment would be triggering of CEQA, so resolution would be amending the IOD and finding CEQA findings of consistency. So if there's any questions regarding this item, let me know.
All right. Very good. All right. Are there any questions? Commissioner Kowalden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this, so the area underneath the bridge on the south side, the confluence of Stonelock 1 and Stonelock 2, where I think we still have this, which is the trail. The trail goes up to Jefferson, and then you cross at Jefferson, and you come back to the water again. Correct.
Correct.
Now, in just the physical nature of the area under the bridge, is it humanly possible for folks to go through that way? Forget regulations and ownership and all that stuff at the moment. Just actual human behavior.
Not right now. There's a fairly large face from the existing bridge that kind of prevents the ability to traverse that. And we did actually spend some time looking at that issue, going out there and seeing if we could come up with a creative solution. And then it gets into all the regulatory issues. But right now, there's no way to at least safely get back and forth in that space.
Okay. I mean, the Austin, in water trail is a great example, and I know you've been looking at those. We ought to keep looking at. My only concern was that if it is possible for folks to make it to do it, they will do it,
Right.
And then we're just left with a health and safety or homeless encampment hazard that we don't need. So if it's not possible, and this will be actually used as the trail as opposed to everybody just cutting right through it, then it makes sense.
We will continue to look at other options, but the main focus is just getting the trail in place for now.
That makes sense.
Any other comments? Thank you. All right. Seeing none, we need a motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll move the recommended action.
So we have a motion by Ledesma, second by Sandine.
I'll second that.
Second by Sandine. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you. That concludes our regular agenda. Moving on to commission reports. Are there any commissioner reports?
I did, actually, Mr. Chair, just want to report that in Washington DC, at the end of last month, I met with the director of the Civil Works for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers about a variety of topics, principally flood protection, but also just to convey the thanks of the commission for the ultimate resolution that or at least the current resolution on the maintenance dredging side. So, and he'd heard about, he comes from within the Corps, heard of the project, had been supportive of it, and so very positive.
Right, Port CEO report.
Nothing other than we don't anticipate a meeting in March. We'd come back on a regular meeting on April 4th.
Very good. All right, thank you, Marty. All right, so we're looking for a motion to adjourn. A motion and a second, signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.